Okay, you can start now.
Okay, good. Just checking my sound. We're good to go? Wonderful. All right. So again, good morning, everyone. And once again, a very warm welcome to World Vision's inaugural Asian Summit for Corporate Good. My name is Neville Wepner. I'm World Vision's Resource Development Director for the Asia Pacific. And the title of our first session is Youth as Drivers of Inclusive Economic Growth. Can we just pause that? Yeah. So we'll come to that. We'll come to that in a second. Are we good to continue? Right. I can't hear a thing. So let's just continue. I'll watch on the screen if there's any challenges. All right. So let me start off by quoting a very famous Chinese proverb. And it goes something like this: that one bee cannot alone produce honey, and neither can one grain of rice provide a full meal. I'm also South African. Many of you might be able to tell from the accent. And one of our greatest statesmen, Nelson Mandela, often used to highlight the importance of youth, saying that the youth and young people were important because they, in fact, would be the leaders of the future. And hopefully today's session is a great opportunity to do two things. Firstly, to recognize that it takes all of us collaborating together, working collectively to do something truly special, worthwhile, and sustainable. And the second part is to acknowledge that young people, youth, can truly be powerful drivers of the kinds of social, economic, and political change that we so desperately need if we are to build a future that is more prosperous, more sustainable, more inclusive, and more equitable. And so this morning we've gathered and invited a number of highly respected panelists and experts in their field to be able to share their insights and their views on the topic. They'll be ably supported by our moderator, Christine. But before I introduce Christine Lee, I'd like to just pause briefly and invite you to watch a short video clip. Hi, moving on. We seem to have had a little sound hitch there, but I'm going to move on just to introduce Christine then. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Christine Lee as the moderator for our session. Christine is currently the Regional Ops Director for Vision Fund International. Vision Fund is a wholly owned subsidiary of World Vision, effectively providing small loans and financial services to some of the most vulnerable parents working very hard to start up and expand small businesses across the region. These proceeds from these funds go on to be able to better feed, educate, and care for their children. So Christine has had a highly successful career in leadership, in wealth management, in banking, in consumer services. In addition, she continues to be an advisor to a number of family businesses, particularly next generation leaders. She sits on a number of boards and is also a certified executive coach working primarily with women leaders. And so with that, we very much look forward to our session, Christine. And so over to you and our guests.
Thank you very much, Neville, for that introduction. I just want to do a quick check to make sure that you can all hear me well.
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Well, it is indeed my pleasure to be the moderator of this really exciting segment, the Fireside Chat, and the topic of which is youth as drivers of inclusive economic growth. Now, as a mother of 4 children, 4 millennials, when you will recall, when those of you who have children, that when they were young, if you've asked them questions like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? So every child, regardless of their circumstance, regardless of where they've grown up or what society or what community they've grown up in, have dreams and have aspirations. Young people have an opportunity, they have the potential of being drivers of economic growth, increased prosperity, and political and social change. And in this world, as we've heard earlier from the first session, there's just so much that's happening around us that's causing economic duress, social duress, mental duress, in fact. And a lot of the youths in our communities, and in particular, the most vulnerable communities that World Vision and Vision Fund serve today, have this fear of the future. What's my life going to be like? They have this concern about how they're going to break into the future. They too have dreams. They too have their aspirations. So it is really indeed my pleasure today to be moderating this particular session on youth as drivers of inclusive economic growth. And with me, I'm very, very fortunate and privileged to be joined by my distinguished panel, and all of whom are hugely passionate, hugely successful individuals who spent many years of their career in the area of social impact and youth development. And they are also representatives of very forward-looking, very successful organizations which actually recognize the immense potential of youths in the workforce as leaders in their companies and their communities. So it is indeed my pleasure to introduce the first of my panelists, and he is William Chu, who is the Global Head of Future Skills, Group Corporate Sustainability of HSBC. Now, William, I'd like you to unmute yourself and please kindly introduce to us in the next couple of minutes a little bit about what HSBC is doing in the area of youth development and inclusion. Thank you. Over to you, William.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Christine, for the very kind introduction. Once again, my name is William, and I work for HSBC. And as you know, HSBC is a bank. So, and at HSBC, we have a sustainability strategy, and I'm part of that strategy, and I'm responsible for the implementation of a future skills strategy. So we talk about engaging young people and to help them see the risk and opportunities in the future, and then as a result of the various transitions that they might be experiencing. So we talk about the low carbon transition, and then we help them face technological changes, and then we also help youth tackle any macro changes that they might be facing in the local communities. So my work involves working quite closely with a lot of nonprofits, organizations, as well as educational institutions in delivering our programs. So this is a very brief self-introduction, and I look forward to a very interesting dialogue to come. Thank you. Back to you, Christine.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was muted there. The next panelist that I have with us today is Ibin Chu. And Ibin is the head of community investing and development of Citibank. So I'll now turn it over to Ibin to introduce a little bit about yourself and also what your institution is doing in the area of youth development and inclusion.
Thanks, Christine, and good morning to all. My name is Ibin Chu. I head Citi's community investing and development efforts in Asia Pacific across 17 countries where Citi is present. The community investing and development team at Citi utilize a suite of tools, including philanthropy from Citi and the Citi Foundation, inclusive finance, impact investing, community engagement and volunteerism, to invest in the equitable and inclusive growth of communities. At the Citi and the Citi Foundation, we have a long track record of supporting youth. In fact, we've invested more than 275 million US dollars in philanthropy globally to support youth employment and empowerment over many years. Here in Asia Pacific in 2020, as part of our Global Pathways to Progress initiative, Citi Asia Pacific and the Citi Foundation announced a collective commitment of 35 million US dollars in philanthropic investment to advance economic opportunities and employment for youth from low-income and underserved communities in the region by 2023. In addition, the bank also committed to offer 6,000 jobs and 60,000 job skills training opportunities for young people at Citi Asia Pacific over the same period of time. In the first 2 years towards this commitment, we've delivered more than 24 million US dollars, supporting 49 organizations across the region, which are serving over 111,000 youths who are facing challenges in their employment journey, from inequality and social barriers to vocational skills training, from financial education, leadership, and social skills to school to work transition and the support systems and the enabling environment. Thanks again for having me and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Ibin, and welcome. Our next panelist is Vetmaniwari, and he's the Chief Operating Officer of the National Skills Development Corporation of India. Over to you, Vet, to tell us a little bit about what your institution does.
Good morning, Christine, and warm good morning to all. National Skill Development Corporation is a public-private partnership where the government of India is the largest shareholder, but the private sector is the majority shareholder in the company. Since inception, the National Skill Development Corporation has trained over 20 million people in various vocational skills and has provided financing to skill providers who want to set up the skilling institutions. But we are finding that this topic of youth as drivers of inclusive growth, this topic has become very relevant post-pandemic because a lot of changes we are seeing across us. One, that the businesses have changed, the workplaces have changed considerably post-pandemic, and that calls for reskilling and upskilling of the youth population at a population scale. So that is extremely important agenda that we see in front of us. And in that context, the career counseling of youth becomes very important because they might have, some of them might have started on some career with some skills with them, but the change workplaces and the change economic scenario requires them to pivot to some other set of skills. And that is the career counseling and creating awareness about the reskilling and upskilling is one of the main agendas. And accordingly, we are gearing up to train about 25 million people over next 4 years. That is the goal that we have taken for us. We are also conscious of the fact that the governments, however hard they may try, but may not be able to provide all the resources for this massive task. And that is where we are working closely with philanthropics and the private sector to bring alternative capital to this sector, because there are poor sections of society who may not have access to the skills that they badly need. So that is through financing we are bringing the inclusive agenda. We are also conscious of that the nature of economy is changing in a way where employment in terms of jobs may not be as forthcoming as it was earlier. And entrepreneurship at a micro and at an individual micro and group level becomes extremely important. So that is another new agenda that we are taking for ourselves. That how do we support individuals and collectives to pursue the entrepreneurial opportunities for themselves. To drive this massive transformation, we are investing heavily on a digital infrastructure, because what we find is that one of the biggest inclusion driver is access to digital means of learning, because that is how we can reach out to those who might be facing economic distress. And in that sense, we have pivoted our purpose to skills for all, anytime, anywhere. So that means that people might be pursuing some economic pursuit, they should be provided reskilling, upskilling opportunities at a place and time of their choosing. And that is where the digital plays a big role. So digital transformation of skill ecosystem in India has become important, both from the perspective of management of this whole process of reskilling and upskilling, but also from the context of delivery and content. And another area where digital is going to play an important role in our scheme of affairs is that we would like to nurture startups. And that is where the startup incubators we are setting, who can use technology to reskill, upskill 25 million people over the next 4 years. So a large spectrum of activities that we are doing. And through this forum, I would reach out to all the communities financing community, uh, who want to participate in this agenda of ours. You are most welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much there, Vet. The next person on our panel is Lito Tayag, and he is the country managing director of Accenture in the Philippines. Over to you, Lito, to tell us a little bit about what your institution is now doing in the area of youth development.
Thank you very much, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Lito Tayag, and I'm the country managing director of Accenture in the Philippines. And today, Accenture in the Philippines employs more than 70,000 people in the Philippines. I'm also a member of the board of trustees of a number of schools and nonprofit business organizations, including the Philippine Business for Social Progress and the Philippine Business for Education. Accenture is a major player and a leader in the IT BPO industry. As a responsible citizen, Accenture aims to bring value not only to our clients and our people, but just as importantly, to our communities. Our corporate citizenship initiatives, which are integral to our sustainability strategy, are focused on creating positive and lasting impact to our beneficiaries. And we have chosen the youth as our target group. We focus on the development of their skills to prepare them to be productive members of society. Among our programs for the youth are the Skills to Succeed Academy and the Near Hire Training Program. The Skills to Succeed Academy is a proprietary Accenture asset. We have implemented it in the Philippines to help fellow Filipinos plan and prepare for a successful career journey. The modules include employability skills that will enable them to be ready for the job market. Simple examples include how to make a resume or how to prepare for an interview. Since our implementation, more than 100,000 Filipino youth have trained using the Skills to Succeed Academy. In our near-hire training program, we train the youth in areas which they were deemed less skilled based on their previous employment applications. In fact, their previous employment application rejections. In particular, we have focused on English and communication skills. So far, we have trained more than 1,700 youth in our near-hire training program, and 1,100 were employed already, not only by Accenture, but in fact, mostly by other companies in the IT BPO industry. Through these corporate citizenship programs, we leverage our strength as Accenture to make a difference in the lives of the unprivileged youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delito. Thank you for being here with us. Our fifth panelist is Pratik Hegde, and he's the Chief Operating Officer, Asia Pacific of Generation.org. So over to you, Pratik, to tell us a little bit about Generation.org and what do you do?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Christine, for that introduction. As Christine mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Generation in the Asia Pacific. Generation is a global not-for-profit, which was set up 6 years ago by McKinsey to bridge the gap between the education to employment system. So our goal is to make education to employment systems work for everyone, regardless of their social status, education background, or gender. We run demand-led employment programs that prepare, place, and support people into careers that are otherwise not accessible. Till date, our programs have supported over 60,000 unemployed and underemployed people across 17 countries to get into in-demand jobs. Generation works mostly with youth who face significant barriers to enter into in-demand jobs, such as maybe coming from low-income backgrounds, lack of relevant education qualification, and prior experience. We also work with employers to change their hiring practices to make them more inclusive and get them to consider youth coming from non-traditional backgrounds whose CVs may have typically gotten rejected in a usual AI-based screening. Generation also works across the entire ecosystem. We work with the governments, education institutions, corporations, and donors to build scalable employment programs across the countries that we operate in. Specifically in Asia, we are active in India, Pakistan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Singapore, and Australia, including Asia Pacific. And we've essentially seen the employment outcomes that have resulted in something like 83% of our learners who complete our program find a full-time job within 3 months. And these are the employment outcomes that we would like to scale with the help of other partners in the ecosystem while building capability of the ecosystem itself. Looking forward to the dialogue today and great to be here once again.
Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us. Well, the next generation of global leaders really face an enormous challenge, right? Youth unemployment or young people unemployment is actually 3 times higher than that of adults. So the needs are very different amongst the youth compared to their adult counterparts, right? And in fact, the youths actually encounter even greater hurdles accessing education or skills training or employment opportunities and so on. So in the next segment, we'd like to explore a little bit further to do a quick sort of an overall assessment. And I'd like to ask each of our panelists today that given our situation today, from your perspective and from your experience, what are some of the main challenges that youths actually find which hamper them from participating fully in the economy? And how can we, as global citizens, whether we're from the public or the private sector, fully harness and maximize the potential of youth? So I'd like to first ask Vet for your view.
So, according to me, what we have found is that post-pandemic, the economic value chains have been disrupted immensely, and that have caused rejigging of the workplaces. So there, what we are finding is that there is information asymmetry. The pace at which the workplaces are changing, the youth are not aware of that. and that leads to them not being prepared to reskill or upskill them to tap the new opportunities that they are emerging. Along with that fact that they are not getting the signals from the job market regarding the skills that job market is seeking from the youth, they are also not able to get access to the institutions which can provide them reskilling or upskilling opportunities into the skills that the job market is seeking for. And that is where we see the biggest challenge that youth are facing. And that calls for an action on the part of global community.
Thank you, Vet. What about Lito? From your perspective and your experience, what are some of the challenges that our youth are facing today, particularly those who are from the more vulnerable communities?
Thank you, Christine. You know, in the Philippines today, there is a significant component of the youth who cannot afford to go to college. They are, of course, from the underprivileged members of our society, and so they look for employment instead of pursuing higher education. And despite the recent implementation of the K-12 program in our educational system, which added 2 years of senior high school, there is still a mismatch of what they learn in high school curriculum and the skills requirements of the contemporary jobs in today's digital economy. And this was exacerbated by the pandemic. Thus, many of the youth are either underemployed or unemployed or even unemployable. And so we at Accenture, as part of our corporate citizenship focus, we are offering skills training programs for the youth. In particular, which I mentioned briefly in the introduction, our Near Hire program aims to bridge the gap between the youth skills and the job requirements. This is a 15-day intensive training program. After the program, they can retry for the missed employment opportunities in that they have applied for in the past. On the other hand, in our Skills to Succeed Academy, they learn how to prepare for job search and pursuit. This application, which we own, has more than 30 modules which they can choose from, depending really on what stage of the job application process they are in. In the end, harnessing their potential means helping them get employed, and getting meaningful jobs that match their true potential allows them to be part of an inclusive economy, and that would take or lift them out of the cycle of poverty.
Thank you, Lito. Over to you, Ibin. City Foundation does work globally in many countries. Now, what have you seen as some of the main challenges that youth face today?
Oh, I think my panelists have covered very well on the skill side and the employability side. I probably will look at it on the opportunity side, because I think today's young people are really a strong creative force. They are connected, more globally conscious, and more innovative than any previous generation. More importantly, today's young people want to influence the broader economic, political, or social spheres. And this is echoed by a recent study we've done with AVPM that polled 2018 to 35 years old in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Although the top priority cited was education, it was followed in second and third place by personal empowerment and climate action. I believe it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, because if you look around, many youths are already leading the way on the many fronts of innovation, leadership, social entrepreneurship, and climate change. In order to fully harness the potential of youth as drivers of inclusive economic growth, we need to rethink how we work with young people in sustainable development. We need to change the power imbalance, as many young people are left out of decision-making processes. There needs to be a mindset shift from seeing young people as beneficiaries to seeing them instead as solutionists and leaders. That's why back in 2017, the City Foundation co-created Youth CoLab and have been co-leading the program with UNDP, which aims to tackle the systemic barriers that limit young people's economic, social, and political inclusion. by working closely with multiple stakeholders across the region, including governments, civil society, and the private sector, to strengthen the entrepreneurship ecosystem and the policy environment so that young people can take the lead on new solutions to the region's most pressing challenges. Over the last 5 years, the program expanded from 3 to 28 countries and territories, reached over 200,000 participants, benefited over 11,000 young social entrepreneurs, and helped launch or improve over 1,200 social enterprises. Youth Collab has also established partnerships with over 200 key ecosystem players through a Youth Empowerment Alliance. Youth Collab has become the largest youth movement for empowerment, social entrepreneurship, equality, and social inclusion in Asia Pacific. We are doubling down on our efforts to support the solutions that are created by and for the most marginalized youth, including young women, indigenous and minority youth, LGBTQ+ youth, and youth with disabilities. Looking back on our 5 years of journey with Youth Collab, putting youth front and center to lead a movement that's by youth and for youth has been a game changer. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you so much for that, Ibin. I'm going to ask William a slightly different question this time. William, in Future Skills, which is a huge program that you're running with HSBC, and with your experience dealing with the youth, interacting with the youth, what do you see are some of those skills that industries, right, potential employers are actually looking for from youth of this generation? And could you share a little bit about some of the programs or initiatives that have actually successfully demonstrated that the investment in youth has long-term benefits to both the individual, then the company, as well as to the community at large?
Thank you, Christine, for that very complicated question. So first of all, I think from our perspective, when we pursue a future skills strategy, we really want to help youth to understand what they will be facing in the future. So one of the obvious challenges is to help them understand the change, and they would be able to see that certain gaps are widening, like especially when we talk about the digital economy, and as we talk about like how climate change is going to bring change to the low carbon economy is on its way, and then COVID has been bringing unexpected challenges to so many of our communities. So to help youth is to help them see the risks and the opportunities in the future. So we don't just talk about that they will have to upskill in order to protect their future livelihood, but it's also meaningful to help them see that they all will have to that they have a bright future to come, and then it's very important that they would have the ability to see like future growth opportunities, future career opportunities, etc. So in my space, I talk about sustainability, and then I talk a lot about new areas like green skills, and how new economy, how industries might be providing new opportunities for youth all over the world and in our local communities. So that's point number one. And point number two, I believe, is about connectivity, right? So we have to be able to help youth to connect to each other, to connect to role models, to connect to opportunities. So at HSBC, we talk a lot about like how we want to build like talent pools, right? So we want to be able to be in a dialogue with youth. So we also will have to see the needs from the youth point of view. I mean, we believe that the youth will have a voice in their own future. We need to understand what they think are good for them, and then we engage them in the dialogue and help understand like what might be good for them in the future. So it's about empowerment. It's about helping youth to be able to support themselves through things like entrepreneurial skills development, through putting them in a talent pool, so they kind of talk to each other and really think about what they can do to make their future better and brighter. So that is the type of change-making mindset that we talk about. That youth are not powerless, and it's not like they're sitting there waiting for people to come to help them. Actually, if they look at themselves and then if they think about what hopes and dreams that they have, they also have a role to play, right? So they think about what they can do to their own future to make things to make change happen. So I guess for HSBC, our Future Skills program is not one big mega program, right? So we run programs in many places around the world, especially in places where we run the business, and then we want to be able to tailor make our programs according to local needs. So, but then there are some common themes. First of all, we talk about soft skills. We talk about not just those traditional like collaboration, communication, those types of soft skills, but we focus on like building a positive mindset. We talk about financial capabilities, which means that we look at ways to help youth to plan ahead and to be able to take steps to make the dreams happen through perhaps asset accumulation or through financial planning, etc. So we want to build financial capabilities. And we also promote cross-sector collaboration, which means we want to be able to talk to teachers, educators, youth workers, in order to help build the capacity in the organizations helping youth. So you might be conscious that we have programs running that benefit teachers. So we help teachers build skills, so teachers will multiply the impact of our program as they interact with many students. And that's basically in a nutshell my thinking about youth, helping youth. But so I welcome questions from everybody later on.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for that. By the way, I would like to invite the audience, if you have questions for any of our speakers, please post them on the chat, and we'll take a couple of minutes after this to take a look at some of your questions. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Pratik. Generation.org does a lot of work and has a very high success rate. You mentioned more than 80% success rate in placing youth into employment. So I'd like to hear from you. You not only therefore work with the youth, you also work with the industry players, with the employers, the prospective employers. What are some of the employers looking for from today's generation of youth in terms of skills? What are they looking for?
Yeah, for sure. So while I answer that question, I also want to highlight on what has changed since the pandemic, right? So 2 years ago, when we would go and work with employers, so that's typically our first step is first we work with employers to see what the skills are, right? You would often get very specific answers from the employers. But then since the pandemic, the things that employers are now telling us are stuff like, can the youth deal with the change that's going to come? Right. So because the conception of a particular job role has gone through such a change in the last 2 years that the employers are not just looking for technical skills or domain skills that are required, of course, but what they're looking for is learning agility. Are you able to pick up skills on the go? Are you able to learn by yourself? Do you have the growth mindset? Are you thinking of the future, or are you, sort of very comfortable with what's going on at the present? We also hear employers talk about adaptability, since everyone has all of us have gone through that scenario in the last 2 years where we had to adapt so much within our own job roles. So these are sort of so-called soft skills, but they're not soft anymore, right? So these are really critical skills which we have seen employers often say is a key difference between a high performer and a low performer on their job is usually not the domain or technical skills, but it is these so-called soft skills. In fact, within Generation, we don't address them as soft skills. We call them as behavior skills and mindsets because they are almost equally important as the domain skills and technical skills that people look for. In Generation in Asia Pacific, we work a lot with the digital sector. We actually work with individuals, people who do not have a background in the IT or programming, and we train them to get into jobs such as software engineer or cloud developer, etc. In our experience, essentially what we've seen is it is impossible for anybody who's entering into a digital sector to know every single technology stack or technology tool that's out there, right? So what employers really do is they look for, do you have a basic understanding of some commonly used tools, but do you show the interest and passion and ability to learn new tools when you're on the job, right? So it's really that evidence of learning is essentially what a lot of employers look for, and we prepare youth who come to our programs by offering them not only the training program, but also getting them to go into an apprenticeship with companies to actually learn and create that portfolio on the job before they can actually get into a full-time job. So that's sort of what we have seen as a growing trend in the recent past. Just the last point is also there's been a lot of interest among youth to get into the gig economy and the freelancing economy, right? So one of the skills that is also becoming very important is, are you able to source your own jobs through the freelancing portals, right? So it's not just about maybe you're very good at digital marketing skills and you want to use your skills to earn at your own flexible timing, but you also need skills such as how do you present your work, how do you create a portfolio that will get you enough business from these freelancing portals. So that's another area that I'm seeing that youth who are keen into freelancing kind of work need to develop some of these business development skills early on in their career, along with the other value-added skills that they would bring to the table.